welcome to week number 6 of That Football Show with those fantasy guys.
And we are those fantasy guys.
This week, we're coming into it. Week number 6, we're past the quarter pole. What strikes you so far this season?
Can you believe how bad the New York Giants and or the Atlanta Falcons are? These are two teams that, yes, the Falcons were 13-3 last year. I don't think anybody had them favorites over the 49ers or over the Seattle Seahawks for the Super Bowl, but people certainly looked them as in contention to win the NFC South. The New York Giants may or may not have been favorites for the NFC East, but they've got 2 Super Bowls in the past few years. And can you possibly fathom that they could lose one game 38-0 and one game 31-7? There are so many problems there, you don't even know where to look. It's unbelievable, but thank you very much, Hakeem Nicks. We gave you the put up or shut up, and you put up.
Well, I'll tell you this. I think that it's more unbelievable to me how bad the Giants are than how bad the Atlanta Falcons are. Falcons never really had a great defense, and their problems are a lot due to injury, especially now, which we'll get to with Julio Jones out for the season. But the New York Giants, I mean, they're just bad. I mean, they have no excuse for it either. I know they lost some starters on defense, but, I mean, they're the same offensive group they were last year, and they can't do anything. They can't run the ball. Receivers are running the wrong routes. There's no communication between Eli and his wide receivers. I mean, these are guys he's had for 3, 4, some 5 years. I just don't understand what's going on there. I mean, is it all linked to that tight end in New York? I mean, because that's the only part that's missing there.
Well, who knows what's going on? I mean, the defense is bad, the offense is bad, no communication, bad routes. But the crazy thing is, yes, I agree the Giants are, it's more amazing that they are 0-5 than the Falcons are 1-4. But you got to remember, the Giants have a way better chance of actually making the playoffs. I think they're only 2 games out of first place.
Yeah, well,
0-5. So they could come back and win the division because all the people ahead of them, they're playing 1 or 2 more times. Probably most of them 2 times and one of them 1 time.
Well,
so they definitely can make up the ground and win that division.
Yeah, well, the year that they won the Super Bowl and they beat the Patriots, they snuck in the playoffs at, 8-8?
Which year was that?
Yeah. Let's move on to key injuries. You see him on the screen. Julio Jones out for the season. Owen Daniels, Michael Vick, thank you. David Wilson, Darren McFadden, and Steve Johnson. I know who jumps out at you, but tell everybody else.
Well, I know about a couple of weeks ago we talked about a trade, possibly Dez Bryant for Julio Jones, and we discussed, if there should be a little sugar added to that. That trade didn't go through that week, but that trade did go through a week later, and I finally pulled the trigger because nobody on my team is untouchable. If I get the right deal, I'm willing to make a trade. If you make an offer that I think is fair and equitable for me, that's great. If it's equitable for you too, great. I'm glad you offered something that benefits you. But I finally pulled the trigger on Julio Jones and Dez Bryant, who we said were pretty interchangeable. So I got at the time. So I got 99 yards out of him, no touchdowns, and he's out for the season. And on a side note, in your league, I traded for Roddy White the same week. The first week I had both of them on my team was this past week, and they both got hurt. When they were both standing next to each other on the sideline in the fourth quarter with the game on the line, I knew my fantasy football season was in serious trouble.
You're like the Grim Reaper. I'll tell you who jumps out at me is David Wilson. I mean, just when he shows a spark of life, just when he starts to come around, he gets hurt. And what was really unimpressive to me during that game was the 2 backflips he did. I mean, you score 1 touchdown after sucking all year long, and you're going to celebrate with a double hamstring, which, by the way, being able to do 2 backflips does not make you a good NFL running back. Do something before you celebrate. Of course, now he's hurt, and who knows what's going to happen to the Giants from here on out with that running game. Eli might have to throw it 60 times a game from here on out.
Well, that would help me a lot since I lost Julio Jones. Maybe Hakeem Nicks will become a starting wide receiver on my team because the battle for my number 2 wide receiver is right up in the air right now.
I'll tell you what, that might be a little sneaky fantasy advice right there, kind of tongue-in-cheek, but you never know. I mean, seriously, the Giants might need to throw the ball a lot the rest of this season.
Yeah, and we got a spark of life. You said about a spark of life from David Wilson. We finally got a spark of life. Like I said, we put him up. Hakeem Nickford put up our shot, put up 142 yards. Didn't get in the end zone, but anytime you can get 142 yards, I'm going to assume he's not your number one wide receiver, because what were you doing in the draft if that ended up happening? So if he's your number two or your flex and you get 142 yards, in most leagues, that's a pretty decent day.
Absolutely. Let's move on to the hunt for Red October, the ultimate sub. Who's on a bye this week, Jay?
This week we got Atlanta. So those wide receivers, whether they're on the IR or on a bye, they're not playing this week. And we got Miami with, the over-touted Lamar Miller taking the deep sleep this year. He was your sleeper, wasn't he? And we got Mike Wallace. I'm not sure who's doing worse between those two guys, but those are the four, and along with Matty Ice and Steven Jackson, who's been hurt all year. So evidently, if you're a Falcons relevant fantasy football player, you're hurt. Or on a bye this week. And then there's a couple of Miami Dolphins on a bye. Matty Ice, Julio Jones, Roddy White, Lamar Miller, Mike Wallace. Those are the people we're looking to find the ultimate sub for this week. And what'd you have last week?
Last week I told you to start Kellen Winslow, and he was 1 for 1 for 1. It sure looked like he was going to be a high target guy coming into that game. But Jeff Cumberland was the guy who stepped up and really took that role as the tight end to go to, and definitely doing the most with his touches. 3 catches for 79 yards and a touchdown, and he sure looks like the tight end moving forward to have. But that one touchdown kind of saved the day for my ultimate sub, and if you started him, at least you got 6 points out of him. Not a great bye week sub, but at least he got 6 points, which wasn't as much as a lot of other tight ends out there. Do you want to go into yours?
I think my last week, just put up the stats. I really don't have to say anything.
All right. Well, on that note, I will tell you about my this week ultimate sub. And I'm going out on a limb here, and you're going to love it, because I'm going to tell you something right now that's going to blow your mind. I am taking Mike Glennon, new starting quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as my ultimate sub. And here's why. Mike Glennon came in last week and was 24 for 43 for 193 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. Now, those were only one-game stats, and they were against an Arizona defense that, for the most part, has been getting cut up, but is better than their stats show. He's also completed 50% of his passes, and he's playing the Eagles' defense, who are terrible. The Eagles' defense are in a 3-way tie for 4th worst in the league, with 11 passing touchdowns allowed and 31.8 points allowed per game. Now, 32 points a game, that's 5 touchdowns, okay? And Doug Martin is a good running back, but he's not going to run for 5 touchdowns. So that leaves a lot of points out there for Mike Glennon, his wide receivers, to pick up. And that's why he's my ultimate sub of week number 6. Who you got this week?
After my stellar week last week with Alshon Jeffries, I know I won you a game. This week I'm going out. We've been talking about this particular situation for 5 or 6 weeks now. Darrell Richardson, Isaiah P.
Disgusting.
Where to go? Well, I think Jeff Fisher has made the decision for all of us, and the only back to have there is Zach Stacy. He got knocked out last week, and you would think that would just give him a chance to go back to one of the other guys that they've been trying to put in there, but he said no, he's sticking with Zach Stacy. So I think that actually gives you, from this point on, at least a starting running back, because they're few and far to get. Some teams have 2 and only use them half the time. This team's going to go with 1, and he's going to be the main guy, Zach Stacy. Last week, he had 14 carries for 78 yards. This week, he's playing against Houston, and Houston is, Tampa Bay is a mess. Houston is just Tampa Bay with talent. Who knows what's going on there? Their quarterback can't stop throwing interception touchdowns to the other team. The defense isn't stopping anybody, and the Rams are coming in with a little bit of pride, a little bit of excitement over what happened last week. They're going to get their starting running back. They're going to nail this guy as a starting running back from here on. So him being the starter moving forward, I got him as my ultimate sub this week against Houston. I'm saying 13 carries, 82 yards, 1 touchdown.
Well, I hope you're right. And what I will say from looking at the numbers from that Rams game is it's a little disappointing for Zach Stacy and his new owners that he was still splitting carries with Daryl Richardson. I mean, Daryl Richardson came out, had an opportunity to be an every down back, which is extremely valuable in fantasy football, and just couldn't take the job. Now, Stacy comes in and he only plays on half the downs. So I don't know what's going on there. Maybe Stacy picks up the other half of downs. I'll tell you what, though, I have Daryl Richardson and I have Isaiah Peed, and I'm not chasing Zach Stacy. As a matter of fact, I'm cutting Richardson and Peed this week, and I'm moving on to better prospects.
Who are you picking up?
I'm not telling you. What I will tell you, though, is that Paul has a ultimate sub this week, and you want to tell us who he is?
Yeah, Paul last week went with Cecil Shorts. He had 5 catches for 74 yards and a touchdown, so that was a pretty good week for Paul. This week he's going with Jeremy Curley for the New York Jets, who on the season has 14 catches for 203 yards and 1 TD going against the Steelers. Paul doesn't have any faith in that quickly aging Steelers defense, who also might be in the conversation for great disappointments, along with the the Giants and the Falcons.
Yeah, the Jaguars are a disappointment, but nobody's
surprised.
Nobody expected them to do anything. Let's move on to tough sits.
Sit down, Waldo.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. Last week I had a tough sit of Reggie Wayne, 6 catches, 65 yards. Hopefully you found a better option for your wide receiver. Going against that Seattle defense is pretty easy. You could pretty much pick a stud player and go with them. This week, my tough sit, we already mentioned that the Arizona defense is better than their stats appear, and I'm going riding that pony. I'm going to say that Frank Gore is going to be a tough sit this week. He seems to be going every other week. Stud, dud, stud, dud. And he was a stud last week. I'm going to dud this week. On the season, Frank Gore has 78 carries for 376 yards and 3 touchdowns. I'm not expecting anything out of him this week. And the reason why might be that San Francisco passing game is awful. It is terrible. There's no reason to cover the wide receivers. You have to double team Vernon Davis, but that's it. I mean, the wide receivers are terrible. They got to rely on the run. If you can stop the run and prevent that 165-yard touchdown from Vernon Davis that won me a fantasy game last week, you should be all right against the San Francisco 49ers. I'd rather start Giovanni Bernard. Willis McGahee, he's only going to get you 3 yards a carry, but if they get down towards the end zone, he's going to score a touchdown. Sure. And Danny Woodhead, out of nowhere, is becoming extremely fantasy relevant. You can consider him for a flex position any week. Depending on how you drafted, you might consider him for your number 2 running back.
Absolutely. Last week, Paul and I both told you to sit DeMarco Murray. Now, we were almost right, but we were still wrong. DeMarco Murray was 12 carries for 43 yards and a touchdown. If you take away the touchdown, he had a pretty average day. But the touchdown that saved me with Kellen Winslow sunk us with DeMarco Murray. We were right about one thing, though. There was a ton of points scored in that game, and Tony Romo threw it a ton. Romo was 25 for 36 for 506 yards, 5 touchdowns, and an interception. And it's not surprising with Romo putting the ball up that much that Murray only had 12 carries. And we showed you the information last week. When Romo throws it a bunch, Murray doesn't really have a chance to get going. He did get you a little garbage touchdown there, so it kind of saved the day if you started him. And like I said, sunk us if you didn't. Now, this week, you're also going to love, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you to sit LaShawn McCoy this week against the Tampa Bay awful Buccaneers.
Whoa!
LaShawn McCoy is 98 for 514 yards and 3 touchdowns this season, but he's playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Big deal, right? Well, Tampa Bay is the only team in the NFL not to give up a rushing touchdown. The Eagles also have a new starting quarterback in Nick Foles. Nick Foles is 19 for 30 for 246 and 3 touchdowns. Now, at the helm, beating the New York Giants, he threw for 2 touchdowns. And I think that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to say, okay, Nick Foles, you can throw 2 touchdowns on the New York Giants, but can you throw 2 touchdowns on us? We don't think so. We're going to stop the guy who we know can beat us in LaShawn McCoy. They're going to put 8, 9 in the box and dare Foles to throw it over the top. Now, if Foles can throw over the top, McCoy might get going, but I still think they hold him out of the end zone because they've done it to every running back they've met this year. So LaShawn McCoy is my tough sit for week number 6. What'd Paul have?
Paul had Phillip Rivers as his tough sit versus Indy. That's a great game. It's going to be on Monday night. He said he'd rather start Jay Cutler, who is coming on pretty good. He'd rather start Alex Smith, or he'd rather start Andy Dalton. So Paul's got a couple of quarterbacks out there that you might be able to pick up and play over Phillip Rivers, who you probably also picked up.
Absolutely. Now it's time for put up or shut up. You see it on the screen. Who's in the crosshairs this week, Jay?
Well, it's really funny because you just mentioned it. Nick Foles now has a chance to secure that starting job. And I think he's going to be given every opportunity to, because I think as they look at the team, they know that Michael Vick is not the long-term answer. He was kind of the stopgap, and they were waiting until they had an opportunity to go another way. Now's their opportunity. And Nick Foles, you have a chance to secure that job. The offense is going to be run a little bit different. I don't think anybody's worried about the spread option where Nick Foles keeps the ball. He might keep it once or twice to keep the defense honest, which if the defense isn't honest, that means they're going to be nailing Shady McCoy like you're talking about. Right. But if he keeps one or two early, that might open up some lanes. And then once you go with Shady McCoy one way, once you run outside and duck down, get out of bounds, then you run and play action pass. You got Deshaun Jackson. You got, Riley Cooper. You got all kinds of options. This is the chance for him to put up or shut up. And if he puts up, you might want to make a claim on him pretty quick.
Absolutely, because he's shown that he can do it against the Giants, and we're about to find out if he can do it against a better defense in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You see it on the screen, Wall Street, buy low, sell high. Who you got this week, Jay?
Well, we have a trend of receivers coming off suspensions, first game back, and blowing up.
Absolutely.
Who was your guy that did it?
Josh Gordon, baby. Flash Gordon.
Flash Gordon. Yeah, he came in and saved
He's
your
gonna
season.
save every one of us.
Well, that's exactly what Justin Blackmon did last week. He came in, 9 catches, 136 yards, and a touchdown. But it is the Jacksonville Jaguars. He cannot possibly keep this up. They have no running game. They have a very limited passing game. It all revolves around them having no quarterback, offensive line, or defense. And that being the case, you might be a flash, but you're not gonna make the marathon. He's not gonna surprise anybody. Kid's got all the talent in the world. He does. But on this team, in this system, with those players around him, he's not gonna have a chance to show it. And he has shown something right now. And there's probably somebody in the league that, I don't know, might have just lost a top wide receiver. I can't think of a wide receiver that. Let's just say Julio Jones.
Right, or Roddy White.
Or Roddy White, exactly. If someone in your league has one of those guys and you have Justin Blackmon, that might be a guy that you can sell high. He might be in panic mode and might see 9 catches, 136 yards, and 1 touchdown. I need that right now.
Absolutely.
Now, being an owner of both Julio Jones and Roddy White in 2 different leagues, I wouldn't take that trade, but check your league. There might be a guy, because you got 2 options. If you have Justin Blackmon, there's probably one guy with each of those guys. Roddy White's out 4 to 6 weeks. Julio Jones is out for the year. Maybe you can get them into a bidding war and get something really good out of it.
That's
but
a great
sell
point.
him now, because his value is not going to be higher than it is now. He's not going to have 10 catches for 150 yards next week.
Well, I'll tell you who could use Justin Blackmon is the Atlanta Falcons right now. They could definitely use him. What I will say about Justin Blackmon, and I'm not saying that I disagree with you, but I'm saying if you're a gambler and you're willing to wait it out one more week, you might be worth your while to do so. His value might go up a little bit more, because one of those teams that is tied for the worst, giving up 11 passing touchdowns, is the Denver Broncos, believe it or not. And that's just probably a product of them scoring so many points. But Denver Broncos are going to score a lot of points on the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're going to have to throw the ball. He might have another productive week, but after that, I agree with you. If you gamble and you keep him one more week, absolutely get rid of him. This week, for my buy low, sell high, I'm going to talk about 2 players. And the first one is just an obvious. And while I was looking at some numbers and stats, getting ready for the show, I was amazed to see that this wide receiver was only owned in 50% of leagues. That means in half of the leagues out there, He's an available free agent. I'm talking about Austin Pettis. Pettis is 22 for 222 and 4 touchdowns. All this guy does is catch touchdowns.
Chris Carter.
He almost had one, right? Chris Carter Part 2. He almost had one against San Francisco. That would give him 5 touchdowns on the year. He was tackled at the 1-yard line, incidentally. He's very clearly Sam Bradford's go-to guy in the red zone. He's got a couple targets, but he feels comfortable with Pettis. He's forcing the ball to him. If you're in 50% of those leagues where Pettis is out there, add him now, because he's on pace, and I know I'm not a big fan of pace numbers, but he's on pace for 700 yards, big deal, and 12 touchdowns. That's ridiculous. If you can grab Pettis, grab him now. And I think you got just kind of a little hint as to who I'm going after, dropping Isaiah Pete and Daryl Richardson.
But I find it interesting that you're keeping your picks on the Rams.
Yeah, well, hey, you find a team, somebody's going to score some points on there. But the guy I really want to talk about this week, who's owned in 18% of leagues, is Donald Brown. Donald Brown took this opportunity as a backup running back by the horns and is driving it for everything it's worth. He is 19 for 157 and a touchdown. For you math wizards out there, that's 8.3 yards a carry. That is ridiculous, and there's no way that the coaching staff of the Indianapolis Colts have not noticed his production. In fact, he is so good right now, if I would start him over Trent Richardson if I were the Colts. I don't know if it's Trent Richardson's lack of knowledge for the playbook, but it's not for a lack of opportunity. Trent Richardson, since going to Indy, is 38 for 116 and a touchdown. That's a 2.98 yard average. There is no way that if the Colts continue to struggle the ball with Trent Richardson, that they don't hand it off to Donald Brown. With an 8.3 yard average in limited role, how do you not give that guy more touches? And I've read that the coaches say, we know we have to get Donald Brown more involved. Everybody knows I love T.Y. Hilton, and he had a great week last week against a really tough defense. So, on a side note, if you got Hilton, if he can do it against the Seattle Seahawks, which we said before the show, he can do it against anybody. I'd lock him into your flex position for the rest of the year. But if you can get Donald Brown right now, whether you're a Trent Richardson owner or whether you just need running back help, there is no way that the coaches can ignore an 8.3 yard average. He's going to see the ball more. And if Richardson either gets hurt or demoted for the rest of the year because of his lack of knowledge for the playbook, Donald Brown is set up to be an absolute stud running the ball for the Indianapolis Colts.
I agree, and one of the big keys that you forgot to mention that is going to help Donald Brown is the injury to Ahmad Bradshaw, because I think he was the backup running back, but now that he's out of the picture, Donald Brown is going to be able to step up there.
Who is also running like a madman. I don't know. It must be the corn in Indiana or something. It hasn't affected Trent Richardson yet, but all of their running backs are just running through walls right now.
Yep.
It's unbelievable. Let's move on to Roy's Rants.
Thanks, Rick and Jay, and welcome to this week's Roy's Rants, where we're going to rant about the Atlanta Falcons and Mike Smith, their head coach. Those of you who watched the game on Monday night had to be infuriated like I was. 4th down, with 1 second left, you went for it. I get going for it at home, but you went for it. And you got rejected. Luckily, a flag came out, defensive holding, giving you another try. 1st and goal from the 1, with no time left. 1 free play. You've been stuffed already. It took you 7 minutes to muster the 24 yards that you had to get inside that red zone area and to the 1 yard line. You put away all your best weapons in Julio Jones, and Roddy White, though limpy, still a threat. And you bring in 5'6", 196-pound Jacquez Rogers in the backfield and 3 tight ends. Everybody knows you're going to go for a run. You've only got 1 legitimate pass catcher on the field and no time left. Why are you not kicking a field goal? Put that question aside. Let's just go ahead and focus on this one play still. Again, Jacquez Rogers in the backfield. Instead of the 5'11", 246-pound Jason Snelling, the hammer you have on your bench, who actually, for the season in this game, outrushed Jacquez Rogers yards per carry wise. I still don't understand the play call. And lo and behold, he gets stuffed. Matter of fact, I'm going to be generous here. I think he lost 6 inches on the play. End of half, chasing 17-7. Are you so concerned about the Jets' offense that you had to go for it to get 7 more points rather than get the 3 points and build any form of momentum? It's boggling to the mind to think that you would call that play and get stuffed and go ahead and call it again. The football gods obviously saw fit to go, whoa, 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 you must not have realized the situation. Here's a penalty. You should kick the field goal. Here, have another play. And instead, you went ahead and tried to score again. That was the stupidest thing I've seen this year. You've now beat out a lot of people, including my favorite, Danny Trevathan. You, Mike Smith, are the worst bobblehead of the year with that play call. Let's talk about the fact that your offense has been struggling a little bit this year. Matt Ryan, having a decent year, has 10 touchdowns through 5 weeks, 2 touchdowns a game, good numbers, top 3 quarterback this year as fantasy stats go. But you have a struggling running game because Steven Jackson can't stay healthy. Julio Jones is having a good season. Well, he was, but now he's out for the year. Do you know why? Karma came and bit you in the butt. You went for it and got stuffed, and you lost the game by 2 points. Oh, wait, let me do the math. That field goal would have probably netted you a 1-point win at the end of the game. But, lo and behold, you chose not to. Morons. Rick and Jay, back to you.
Thank you, Paul Roy, for that rant about the Atlanta Falcons. Jay, you got anything else?
I could not agree with Paul more. I mean, you're playing the New York Jets, you're the Atlanta Falcons. You don't need at the half with 1 second left to go for a touchdown. You kick the field goal, you make it a 1-score game, and you plan on outscoring the Jets in the second half. And if you had done that, I might have Julio Jones for the remainder of the season.
Okay. Don't be that guy, Jay.
Don't be that coach that goes for it on 4th and 1 from a foot away when the year after you go 13-3 and you're 1-3.
All right. If you're the kind of guy that likes Facebook and you like the show and you can't believe what we've said, or if you have to share it with somebody else or you just want to watch it again, you can like us on Facebook at
That Football Show with those fantasy guys. Ask us questions, post comments, good, bad, or ugly. We like them all.
Absolutely. Now, we have a couple Facebook questions. Would you like yours first, or do you want to give me mine first?
I'll
we have
go
one
first.
for each of us. Okay.
Great show, guys. I got a question. I have Jermichael Finley, the Gronk, and I've been waiting for him to come back all year. The Patriots are very hush-hush with starts. Should I start Gronk, who is going at 4, or should I make the safe choice and start Jermichael Finley at 1?
Well, that's a great question because, as you said, the Patriots like to play this game where they don't tell you anything until 5 minutes before the game. It's rumored that he's going to start this week, more so than any other week so far. But, of course, they're playing at 4 o'clock, so it makes it a real conundrum for fantasy owners. What I would do if I were this fantasy owner is I would find somebody on my team who's not an essential player and basically move him out for somebody else that I could start that's playing at 4 if Gronk doesn't play. Let's take a look at the teams who are playing at 4 o'clock. Tennessee, Seattle, New Orleans, New England, Arizona, San Francisco, Washington, Dallas, Indianapolis, and San Diego. Now, let's eliminate the teams that have tight ends which are most likely owned in those leagues. That leaves us with Arizona, Washington, and Tennessee as teams who have tight ends that are most likely not owned. Excuse me. Now that we're educated on the situation, let's move forward into the analysis a little bit of this one. The tight ends that are out there for those 3 teams are Delaney Walker, who has 4 catches for 21 yards and 1 touchdown. I'm sorry, I don't think that's right. I think he has a couple touchdowns. I apologize. Fred Davis, who is the tight end for the Washington Redskins, who has 2 catches for 14 yards and no touchdowns on the season. And Rob Hausler, who plays for the Arizona Cardinals, who is 2 for 36 and no touchdowns. All of those tight ends are owned in less than 20% of leagues, and they're all playing at 4 o'clock. Now, they're all kind of icky choices. But the odds of, the benefits if Gronk plays are so great that I think what you need to do is target one of these 3 tight ends in this order. Delaney Walker, Fred Davis, Rob Hausler. Sit them on your bench, put Gronk in your starting lineup, and at 4:01, you'll know whether Gronk is starting or not. If Gronk is starting, you leave him alone. You hope for the best. If he's not starting, you drop in one of these tight ends, and at least you have somebody starting in the position. You know, I have Gronk, and he did this to me 2 weeks ago, and in an evening game, I ended up with Gronk on my starting lineup, not playing, and of course, you get 0 points out of that position. So to sum it all up, pick up a tight end that you could start in Gronk's place, and start Gronk, but if you need to, change him out at the very end. And then I thought of one more thing while I was speaking, and I wish I had thought of it earlier because I would have had some things prepared for you. You could also start Jermichael Finley in your tight end position, put Gronk in your flex, and that gives you far more opportunities to sub him out at the last minute, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. That's also a possibility. So I'm saying start Gronk, but have a backup plan for 4 o'clock.
I heard a lot of talking there, and the only thing I really heard was a couple of weeks ago you had Gronk on your bench, and you are a senior fantasy analyst.
That's right. It says it right across the bottom of the screen.
That's just stunning.
No, and you said it wrong. Let's get it right while you're insulting me. I had Gronk in my starting lineup.
Oh, yeah, that's what I meant.
Right.
You had Gronk in collecting 0 points,
That's
and
what
you
I
had
did.
no other options.
I had no other options.
You have to remove senior from your analyst.
Well, I'll put Junior in there
All
just
right.
for you for this one show. But here's now I'll explain to everybody out there, seeing how you brought it up again, why I was in that conundrum. When we were in a keeper league, and I kept Gronk with the intention and the thought that he would be back in week 4. I drafted Jermichael Finley, the exact situation that this owner is in, and knowing that I could start Jermichael Finley for the first 3 weeks of the season. Jermichael Finley was on a bye week in week 4, so I was convinced from everything that I read that Gronk would start week 4. He didn't, and he left me without an option. I got caught behind the 8 ball on that one. You really should have a backup plan, and that's the moral of the story here. Now, let's move on to your Facebook question. The question is, I have Jordy Nelson, James Jones, and Wes Welker. Should I trade T.Y. Hilton for C.J. Spiller? That question really should have read, I have Jordy Nelson, James Jones, Wes Welker, and T.Y. Hilton. Should I trade T.Y. Hilton for C.J. Spiller? Jay, what do you got to say about that?
I like to keep my answers concise.
Yeah, I know.
No. Period. This is what you got to do. Now, I understand you're looking for some running back help, and C.J. Spiller has a little bit of upside, but T.Y. Hilton has too much upside to let him go. I'm not quite sure how you end up with Jordy Nelson and James Jones, both from the Packers, but those two guys are guys you're probably not going to want to start every week together. I know that they put up numbers, but that's where you have the option to trade a guy and get a guy for higher value than C.J. Spiller. And what I mean is somebody that has been fantasy relevant this year, you can get for one of your wide receivers, even if you package them. Because those Packers wide receivers have a little bit more value and cachet than T.Y. Hilton. You trade one of those guys for a higher-end running back, and then you slide T.Y. Hilton into your flex position, or the running back that you get back in your flex position, play it by the matchup. But no, I would not trade T.Y. Hilton for C.J. Spiller. I would aim a little bit higher and get a better running back.
So much for concise answers. Let's move on to Nostradamus.
Chicago, 27-21.
And there you have a concise answer. Let's move on to Survivor Picks. You see them on the screen. Everybody was eliminated after last week. No one made it to the final poll by themselves. So we have a tie between Shane Brown and Paul Roy, who I guess are the default winners. We'll come up with another segment for next week. That's all the time we have for this week's show. This has been That Football Show with those fantasy guys.
And we are those fantasy guys. You are not.
Have a good night, everybody.